Welcome to the Discord of Dreamweaving Dialogues, and today I've got Blythe with me. Hello, Blythe.
Hello, all anti-rat.
Bit single white female, isn't it? I'll put that at the start. Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. Welcome to All Anthrex's Gaming Vexes. On this episode, we're turning our attention to Vaesen, Nordic horror role-playing, Free League's gothic investigation game rooted in Scandinavian folklore, which we've been running through over the past few months. We'll be getting to the setting, the mechanics, the mysteries, and whether the thing actually delivers on its very considerable promise. Before we get into all of that though, just a quick word. If you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to help keep it going, you can find us on Patreon and Ko-fi. Links are in the show notes as always. It's very much appreciated, and it helps more than you might think. Now, regular listeners will know that the Grognard Files are no strangers to these parts. Blythe's been on before alongside Dirk, and very welcome he was too. This time though, he's made the trip under his own steam, which calls for a slightly different introduction. I like to think of it as a top-flight player agreeing for reasons best known to himself to turn out for a Sunday league club on his day off, without the gaffer knowing. We're grateful, we're slightly baffled, and we made sure the pies are decent. Blythe, welcome back. Hope the dressing room met expectations. We also make mention along the way of a couple of new toys I've been getting to grips with recently, the Alchemy virtual tabletop platform and the Saga 20 session note taker. We'll be giving Alchemy a proper look in a future episode, but if you can't wait that long, I've dropped some links in the show notes. Right, what's this Vaesen game all about then? So before we get into our actual experience of playing the thing, let's just take a moment to talk about where Vaesen actually comes from, because it's a slightly unusual origin story as RPGs go. The whole thing starts not with a game designer, but with an illustrator, Johan Egerkrans, a Swedish artist with an absolutely distinctive style, kind of golden age fairy tale illustration crossed with late 90s comic art, lots of ink and shadow and things lurking at the edge of the frame. Johan published a book in 2013 called Nordiska Vaesen, which translates roughly as Nordic beings or Nordic creatures. It was a bestiary of Scandinavian folklore, trolls, the Necken, the Huldra, the Strigoi, treated not as dungeon monsters to be statted up and killed, but as genuine mythological entities with their own logic and their own place in the world. It was a bestseller in Sweden, got an English edition a few years later, and quietly built a devoted following among people who like that sort of thing, which I suspect, if you listen to this podcast, you probably do. Fast forward to 2020, and Free League, the Swedish publisher behind Tales from the Loop, the Alien RPG, Forbidden Lands, and what feels like half the award-winning games of the last decade, adapted Egerkrans' book into a tabletop RPG. Written by Niels Hintzer, he uses a tailored version of their Year Zero engine, the dice pool system that powers most of their games, and drops you into what they call the Mythic North, Northern Europe in the 19th century, but one where the old stories are real. The Industrial Revolution is arriving, the cities are growing, but out in the forests and the mountains and by the Black Lakes, the Vaesen is still very much there. Your characters are investigators with the sight, the rare ability to see these creatures for what they actually are, operating out of a crumbling society headquarters, trying to solve the mysteries that Vaesen bring in their wake. Think less kill the monster, and more figure out why the monster is here and what it wants, which is a very different kind of horror gaming. Reception was, to put it mildly, warm. Tabletop Game magazine called it a horrifying delight. The Goodreads reviews are essentially people falling over themselves. RPG.net gave the art a 5 out of 5 and called the substance meaty. And at the Ennies Awards in 2021, it won 3 gold awards. Best cover art, best interior art, and best monster or adversary, which honestly, if you've seen the book, is not remotely surprising. The art is the thing that gets you in the door after all, and it absolutely deserves every award it won on that front. The product line has grown steadily since then. A Wicked Secret and Other Mysteries, followed with additional scenarios, then Seasons of Mystery, a campaign anthology, which itself won Best Adventure at the Ennies in 2023. Mythic Britain and Ireland, written by Graham Davis of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay fame, transplanted the concept to these shores and won Product of the Year in 2023, which is a pretty significant achievement for any game. There's also a Lost Mountains Saga expansion, the one we played, returning to the Swedish setting, a Carpathian expansion that takes things into Central and Eastern Europe, and as of late 2025, a revised edition of the core rulebook with cleaned up mechanics plus a starter set for people coming to it fresh. The line shows no signs of slowing down. So, that's where it comes from and what it's been up to. Let's talk about what it's actually like to play. So, intros first of all, okay, and about yourself, anything you want to say, about socials, whatever. Who did you play in the game? And have you had any experience with Vaesen, whatever they say, how you call it, before this?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kat, otherwise known as Nevermind the Dice Trolls on most social media. I was playing Dr. Wilhelmina Lindemann during this little short campaign. I have played Vaesen a couple of times, mostly in one-shots and one very short campaign apart from this one.
Have you run it at all?
Yeah, I have run a one-shot.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, I have done a one-shot.
Okay.
But I have not done anything longer, and I think that Vaesen does benefit from being a bit longer than a one-shot.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm Sam Zero Veil on all the socials. I was playing a character called Volta Slack, who was a servant archetype. Yeah, I've never played Vaesen before, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. My name's Andrew. You can find me on social media at Zos93. I played Captain Franz Leiden, who was a Swedish army officer. I've never played Vaesen before, never run it, but it's the first time for this. So.
Okay, all right. So when you say it's a short campaign, Kat, it's actually been 6 months. We tried to play it weekly. I know it never works out that you end up playing these things weekly, but it's actually been medium-sized, I think, sort of 6 months. It was quite a good go at it. And so we played through the starter set, didn't we, first of all? And then we moved into, with the same characters, the Lost Mountains Saga, which is like the first campaign book that came out for Vaesen. So first of all, I think we'll probably just sort of talk through the rule book and talk about that first of all, and we'll talk a little bit about what we played, so the starter set, and then we'll talk about the campaign, and then just some general thoughts, really, because as I say, we did play it over Alchemy VTT, so this was a sort of new experience for all of us, really, and a learning experience, it's fair to say. Usually I'm sort of neck deep into Foundry and all the modules that go with that, so this is probably a slightly simpler from the GM side of things, but yeah, okay, all right. So in terms of the rules and the rule book, anyone got any reflections, thoughts? I think you've all got, either you've got copies or you've got access to it.
I think it's an absolutely gorgeous book and game. The design quality is superb. It follows very beautifully all the way along. They've picked a style direction and stuck to it. It is not the best organised book.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit confusing because some of the rules that you would think would be for the players to look at is in the GM side.
Yeah.
But it's very poorly organised, and I think this is the worst indexed book that Free League have produced, sadly. I will say no indexing is perfect in role-playing games, but this was pretty bad.
Yeah, it is a bit all over the place. And so whenever I run games, I tend to make my own GM screen and almost like the rules summary anyway. But it is all over the place, I think, which is a shame. But I think in terms of the actual, the look of the book, obviously it's based on, is it Johan Egerkrans? I'm going to absolutely butcher this name. Mr. Egerkrans. Whatever.
Yeah, I think that's close, I think.
That's close enough. But I mean, it's almost like the Simon Stannenhag approach. They had the art and then they sort of created the game around the art. So you're right, that's got that consistency. It is beautiful. And it's a nice object, isn't it? Because it's got that sort of tactile cover to it. It's a nice thing to have.
I agree with Kat. I mean, it is a beautiful thing to look at, and I really love the art style. But yeah, trying to create a character and then certainly to progress the character through experience is not the easiest or most obvious thing in the world.
I agree. The artwork style, the whole layout book, it looks great. I don't really have many problems with navigating my way around the thing. It's just It's those rules. Those rules mechanics really bite me sometimes. We'll talk about that in a bit. I like the look of it at all.
Yeah.
Really.
I think that's what drew people in, was again about the look, and it's very well, it is unique. Things are either unique or they're not, and this is unique in terms of its look. I think you're right, Kat, in terms of the organisation, and I think one of the things that, although because we played the campaign and because of the style of campaign it was, that the HQ didn't really come to the fore too much, but there are some aspects where, for example, in the player-facing side of the book, it talks about what they call the discovered locations. So the idea is your player characters, you're all a member of the society, this group of people who've got the sight and can see the Vaesen and therefore interact with them. As you discover and build up your HQ, your home base, there are some elements that are supposed to be discovered. So really, the way it seems to read is that as the player characters find things out, it's almost like, well, you sort of find this area that you might want to spend some of your development points on and invest in. But because it's in the player-facing side of it, it's almost, that doesn't make sense to have it there. If it's meant to be a bit of a secret from the GM perspective, it just seems like it's in the wrong part. It's a little bit odd in that respect.
I think the discovered areas, in a way, would make sense if they encourage on the GM side to encourage the GM to do almost like a mini adventure. Something happens, you go and check it out, and you find this area. And then it's up to you whether you repair it. I kind of feel that's the way it should be leaning towards, but they don't make that clear. I kind of get the impression that's kind of what they want you to do, but they haven't put it there because it's more work for the GM for a start.
It seems like it's just an extra bit to give you a little few extra bonuses in the game that could have been handled a lot more smoothly and delicately, maybe.
Yeah, I think that as well. Basically, it's an interesting way of saying, oh, you can also upgrade your HQ and this gives you various benefits and things, but yeah, it doesn't seem to work in practice. It's almost, we want to give you a role to do this, but we're also going to keep it like really abstract as well and really narrative. It is quite a narrative game anyway, but it's almost like we're going to sort of say, here are these rules, but we're not going to kind of tell you how to really implement them,
Yeah, it almost like it sketches out some space in which you can play the game, and then it's up to you to create that. If it's something you're willing to invest quite a lot of time in, and sort of really delve into it, then you probably do that. But as you say, Kat, I don't think made clear in terms of that could be a way to do it in the core game. Let's come back to the HQ, because again, although it is a very narrative game, it's actually quite clearly set out in terms of the cadence of the game as well, so it's quite prescriptive in that sense. So let's just talk a little bit about the basics. So let's talk about mechanics first of all, and then we can get all that off our chest up front and go from there. Okay, so it's a year zero engine. So if you're not familiar with that, then it's basically it's a pool of D6s, and essentially you're rolling that bunch and then you're trying to get sixes. And the more sixes you get, the better. Okay, over to you guys. If you don't like year zero engine games, this is not for you. But anyway, go on.
The fact that somebody with 2 dice in something could get 2 successes, and yet somebody with 10 dice could get nothing, is always hilarious. I actually think the zero engine is actually suited to in-person role-playing. The reason is that dice rollers on a virtual tabletops are properly random. Humans don't roll dice randomly. As much as we claim we do, you don't. Most people, when you roll more successes naturally if you're hand rolling, and that's because of the way you hold them in the hand. All the other bits, there is always a bit of randomness to it, but if you hold a dice a certain way and then roll it, you've got a high percentage of getting the number you want. And as much as the people out there are going to be outraged and say, I would never do that, come off it. At table, people have more successes than they do on a virtual tabletop.
Wow, is that a true thing?
It feels like it's.
Some people might say that the humans were completely random and the computer wasn't, but
it's more the fact that if I've played this particular dice system in person, we tend to roll better than we would on a virtual tabletop.
We definitely have better successes playing Mutant Year Zero in person than we have. It certainly seemed less swingy playing Mutant Year Zero in person than it did playing Vaesen on Alchemy.
That's interesting. Maybe there's a sort of parapsychology research thing in there somewhere, maybe.
Quite possibly.
I've got a huge bugbear against the system. Obviously, it's going to be random. Obviously, there's a percentage chance of things happening, as it does. But it just seems so wrong every time you roll a handful of dice and get 0 sixes. In the last game we played, the last session, I rolled 28 d6, or I rolled 14, and then I rolled again, and still got 0 6s out of 28. The chance of that happening is 0.63%.
But there's a chance. There's a chance, isn't there? And that's just the way it goes.
It just seems wrong.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I get you.
It does feel wrong. It does feel very, very swingy.
It's either
And
that or
like-
Steve's got a control on alchemy that basically says make their roll.
If I had control, I would make your rolls much better because I'm the biggest fan of my players, as you know.
Fan of the players,
You would just purely and utterly so that when your characters do really big rolls, you can say, well, you know, you just didn't roll.
What a terrible impression I must give as a GM.
To be fair, we didn't laugh at it.
It definitely felt like we were succeeding much less than we should have done in this game.
Odd, isn't it? Because Sam and I have got a lot of experience in playing Forbidden Lands. And even though it's the same mechanic, it's, pulls a d6 and you can push them and roll.
Because you can damage yourself as well if you push your roll.
Yes, and you can in this as well. So, I mean, obviously when you push, you take a condition. I think the difference is and we'll probably touch on this in a bit, but in Forbidden Lands, it feels like there's more jeopardy in something like Forbidden Lands because damaging yourself is more of an issue. And also you get it as a payoff, so you get willpower. In this, you can push your roll, take conditions, and unless you're in a highly pressured situation in the game, actually recovery is quite easy, is my perception. There is very little at risk.
Recovery is a lot easier.
As you know, I don't like Forbidden Lands because Forbidden Lands for me always feels like you're rolling to avoid something bad happening. Whereas here, it did feel like we were rolling to actually achieve stuff. So I think Forbidden Lands is something horrible's going to happen unless you roll really well. Whereas here, it's like, oh, well, you don't succeed, that's not a problem.
With Vaesen, that I understand having the underpinning dice mechanic, but the Vaesen itself, the game, particularly when you read it, feels a lot more to me that it should be run more like a storyteller style.
Yeah.
Very few dice rolls. So as a GM, I'd go, how many dice would you have in that versus my character? If they're not equal, I'm going to probably give it that you will do that because chances are you'd smash it, providing you give me a narrative for it. Unless, of course, it is like a linchpin point, then I do want dice rolling. But it kind of feels more for that sort of system. And the character sheet is quite a pared down character sheet,
It
really.
is, yeah.
So maybe they don't really describe it as a storytelling system, but it's just the way I feel after years of playing storytellers. It just feels more like that system.
I also think, the combat rules don't really work. There's quite a lot of emphasis placed on combat. You can play an ex-army officer as I am, and going back to improving the castle, you could have like guards and you can have an armory and all sorts of things. But I found that combat didn't really work. Obviously many of the Vaesen can't be harmed by firearms or anything anyway. And, there's definitely most of the situations were not, there was definitely no real need for combat in many of the situations. So there's an emphasis in the rules on combat that it certainly didn't really occur in the games that we played.
Yeah,
I mainly use my pistol for threatening people. It's didn't really.
Yeah, and you're pretty good at threatening people. I think there's a couple of points there. So I think from your perspective, Kat, yes, it's almost like you've got a dice pool, okay? Let's say 6 dice, whatever. You say, oh, there's a 1 in 6 chance you're going to get this. But as we know, in reality, rolling the dice meant it didn't happen. But also because pushing the roll, effectively doubling your dice pool, in most situations, unless you're in, a sort of a really threatening situation, it didn't make much difference. So it's almost like you could say, well, let's just double your dice pool. What do we think? How many successes are you going to broadly get out of that? If you're rolling 12 dice, you're probably going to get 2 successes. And you do it that way. Because as you say, I think a lot of dice rolls were irrelevant, really. And although failing forward is a thing in this system, in as much as if you fail, you can still succeed at a cost, it's quite clear about how you can do that. I don't know. I mean, there's always something fun about rolling dice, isn't there? Because obviously seeing people fail when they roll a whole bunch of dice is fun. But then again, it doesn't really help the game move forward, does it really?
It's a bit like in the end, one of the end scenes when the Revenant appeared. If you'd had to make that Revenant roll to rip the guards apart, which was the scene of showing how hard this thing is,
Mm.
damn well they would not have rolled one success, and it'd have ruined it. So it's kind of really, to a certain point, narrative-wise, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, there are points I don't want to roll because I want it to look impressive and impress how dangerous this creature is.
Yeah. And then the creature turns out not to be dangerous at all because it can't have any successes at all.
We had one situation where I've got two people who are set up for combat with the captain and Volta doing what they were doing. And my character on her 2 dice gets 2 successes and absolutely just nails a killing shot on something. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument for the sort of almost, is it Dragonbane where like monsters hit automatically? And you just sort of roll to see what kind of attack they do.
We don't need that at all.
I'm saying, I think if you're going to go a kind of fully narrative game, then you obviously, the players would get a roll to avoid the damage, but there is a sort of argument for, you're facing this incredibly fearsome creature that's got like 20 dice and it rolls 0 successes,
I think, just come back to the point that you made, Andrew, I think that there is quite a lot of detail about combat rules in it. And so it talks about fast action, slow action, etc., and sort of not so much about movement, or it talks about zones and that sort of thing. But as you say, a lot of Vaesen can't be affected by physical attacks anyway, so it's more about that sort of negotiation side of things. But yet there's not an awful lot of focus in the rules on that negotiation side, really. So it feels as though, although it's a beautiful game, I think when you get into it, I think it's only partly realised there's a lot of space in there which isn't necessarily well sketched out. And I think it's that narrative space that is, that's what it wants to be, but it's almost like it hasn't quite got there yet.
As you say, it does feel a bit like they found this beautiful art and this beautiful kind of world concepts, and then they've taken bits from all their other games and kind of put them together to kind of make a rule set that maybe some of its parts don't overall make a particularly consistent system.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say it's not fun to play. I mean, I think it is. I think it's just
it's fun.
Yeah, it's not quite there.
I do like the addition of the talents as well.
Okay.
Giving each archetype their own talents, and then giving a general list of talents, quite useful. But then you can then pick from other people's talent lists.
The one I took basically meant that if I got, I think it was 2 or more successes with a ranged attack, then I could give you guys a bonus. But as we later found out, there's very little useful ranged attack, so it's almost rendered the kind of talent a bit pointless.
Yeah, there's quite a few talents available for reducing fear, which is quite useful though. A lot of the Vaesen are putting out some sort of fear.
I think actually the fear element, that was probably the thing that was most impactful, because it's quite frequent that even if they're only putting out fear 1, essentially you guys could choose whether your character would try and overcome fear with logic or with empathy. Often, as you said, because the dice rolls didn't work, even if something was only requiring 1 success to overcome fear, you weren't doing it. And so we had some fun with you guys being terrified of your characters and doing odd things, like trying to beat a revenant up with a chair or whatever it was that your character's up to, Sam. So I think that was very thematic. Whereas I think, in combat, although there's a lot of focus on combat rules, we stuck with Theatre of the Mind. We had a few maps, but it was more about sort of, relative placement rather than sort of a detailed zone by zone movement, different to what we do in Forbidden Lands, which is very tactical to how we do that. But I don't know if your characters felt in physical danger. As the GM, it didn't feel like you guys were ever really at risk.
Every time it came up against a Vaesen, because there's very little you can do. Very little you can do to actually stop them.
I mean, obviously the giant did huge amounts of physical damage, and we saw that when it killed the ship captain, but so many others had magic, which was really hard to defend against, and plus they seem to be immune to firearms and things. So there was definitely a fearful element in, like, how the hell do we beat these things? Like the spirit of the child, the only way we could beat that was to lay it to rest. We had to follow a ritual in a book to actually do anything to it, really.
There's the 2 whole pages of physical critical injuries and mental critical injuries. That's the thing that puts you in fear of your character.
So you guys were very focused on not being broken at any point. And I kept saying, but there are good things that can come out of this. And you went, nope, We're never going to be broken. I think
for the physicals of fatal injuries.
And given the way the dice were rolling for us, Steve, I mean, come on.
Yeah. When you're rolling 14 dice, getting 0 successes, pushing it to rotating a condition, and then getting 0 successes on the next 14 dice, it's a bit like...
makes you a bit sad, because the idea is that any sort of critical damage that your characters do take, you can heal that in between adventures, or rather mysteries, not adventures they call it, and then there might be things at HQ to help with that. With the simplified crits, actually, most of that becomes irrelevant, so it becomes a little bit more, I think it's less risky. In the end, I don't think any of your characters took a critical injury ever, and then we never actually used the simplified crits at all either for the mental or physical injury. So I think maybe that's because you guys are very experienced role players, and you are almost like taking a Call of Cthulhu character type approach to this, which is, don't go down that hole. Let's just dynamite it.
I think for sure there is probably an element of that, but I also think it's because we were a small party.
Yeah.
I think if we'd had one more, or even, I mean, if we'd had 2 more players, I think we would have pushed it a lot more. But when there's 3 of you, getting out and getting everybody out with you is very difficult. So I suspect it's the party size might have actually made us a bit more cautious.
Yeah, we did take a lot of steps to recover our conditions quite early on as well. Just so we didn't build them up into become broken. So which is just experience, I guess, as having played it and known what we're doing.
So from your perspective, Kat, because I thought that this game, because originally I sort of put it out for 4 players, and for all sorts of reasons we ended up with obviously 3. Do you think it actually suits a bigger play group? I thought it would suit a small group better because it's more narrative.
I think it's a mixture. I think it depends on the players you've got. I think if you've got a small group, you've got more chance of getting more things done. You could certainly throw in a lot more stuff at them for them to do and investigate. But if you want people to push things and get riskier, then I think you need a bigger party. I mean, I liked it as a small group, but it did mean that we were really careful not to get ourselves broken, because if we did, we couldn't have pulled people out easily. To even one person getting injured, pulling them out of somewhere that you're kind of under fire, as it were, and particularly we were under fire in the case of the child ghost, getting one person out would have been really, really difficult. So I think that made us plan it a little bit more. I'm pretty sure with the mementos that Volta has not got a liver anymore because of the amount of swigs he's taken.
Yeah.
I played my dark secret once by switching into my alter ego to get out of fear, which I was looking at the rules later. I don't think you should let me do, but it was quite.
It was fun because Dr. Lindemann is sort of quite a forceful character, and I think your alter ego was probably a lot more socialite.
Said,
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
okay,
very much. Yeah, my good man.
I agree with what Kat's saying. I think a bigger party would enable you to also split the risk a bit, so you would be a bit less risk averse, because if, as you say, if one character starts to get quite towards broken, you can always pull them out and kind of get another character in.
The group of 3, you got to do an awful lot of stuff. You got to use an awful lot of your skills, which was quite good.
I think
that's sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah. Oh, that's always a risk with bigger groups, isn't it? Especially in a virtual tabletop. I think around a table it's easier to engage a bigger group, but yeah, it's worth bearing in mind. So obviously we talked a lot about the sort of the rules that were there. Okay, so dice pools, not succeeding, combat. A lot of focus on that, but probably it's not supposed to be a combat game. Was there any things that you thought were missing? I mean, one thing that I thought about, because it's meant to be an investigative game, it almost feels like it needs more of an investigative type mechanic. So something like, the gumshoe type system, which I think would tie into what you were saying, Kat, about making it more of a World of Darkness type setup, where say you've got so many dice, unbalanced, you would probably succeed and do it that way, so you don't have to roll all the time.
Yeah, I think there were too many skills.
Too many?
Yeah, too many skills. I know it's a really pared down list. We were mixing up things like vigilance and inspiration and investigation.
All the time. That's more because I kept forgetting what they were.
Yeah, because we play so many different similar games. It's the problem.
Yeah.
But you could have put all that down into one observation skill or something like that.
I think there might be an argument for also levels of success as well. If you get 1 success, you get this clue. If you get 2 successes, you get that clue. If you get 3 successes. I think almost like, as you say, a sort of gumshoe kind of Fall of Delta Green style.
I think as long as you've got enough to be able for the game to move forward, that's the thing. Apart from succeed at a cost, it doesn't really specify that in any way. I think from a GM perspective, I don't think it's a beginner's game, as with a lot of these things.
I think
Go on.
some of it, particularly for investigation, I think it should be a case of you get X information, which is a little bit of stuff, but not enough for you to do too much with unless you push it somehow, and then you have to roll maybe. It's the only way I can think of. Otherwise, you're going to have another system tacked on. I'm not sure how it'll work.
Yeah.
The problem with investigative game is they can become a bit railroady because it's almost like, we didn't succeed, but you've got to go here anyway.
But that's with Gumshoe, isn't it? I mean, basically, the whole idea is there's a thread to follow. You will follow it. You got your investigative spends or whatever, and it's almost like that's it's not even implied in this, but that's the sort of approach that you need to take as with any investigative game. But okay, all right. So we've talked about the rules. They're your zero engine. If you don't like them, then probably this isn't the game for you. But if you're willing to put up with them with all its foibles, then as I say, you can pick and choose. In terms of the scenarios we played, so we played the starter box, okay, and then we sort of played the Lost Mountain Saga. So let's talk a little bit about the starter box that we played through. It was relatively quick. It's actually quite a short scenario in there. I mean, I think some people have run it as a one-shot at conventions, actually, which is quite different to other starter boxes. I think some of the other starter boxes have got more of almost like a campaign frame within this, whereas, well, over to you guys. Do you think it was a good starter adventure? Did it do what you needed from your perspective?
I think it's a good starter adventure for a campaign. I mean, it's interesting about it would work as a one shot, but I think essentially it is quite short because it's also designed to kind of set you up as the group, as a society, and then kind of talk about the castle and so I think it's very much about kind of getting you in position to refound the group and getting to sort of dealing with the castle and stuff. So I think it was quite good as a setup for a longer campaign.
I can't remember much about it, to be honest.
It's a long time ago. I think the pacing for it was quite snappy. Very much I think it has been designed to be run in a session to set everybody up. So I do feel it was quite snappy, which is a good thing because it gets you straight into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas, and no offense to the campaign, the Lost Mountain Saga, that felt a lot slower.
Yeah.
Started that like it was a lot slower to get into it.
Yeah.
So I think as a starter adventure, I think it's very good. It introduces all of the points that you want to start at the start of the campaign, gets the players used to this is what the society is, and basically just punts them off into the deep end.
Yeah, and you've got that Codex Occultum in there, so a little bit of information about the Vaesen, which you guys made a lot of use of. I just compare it to things like the Inquest starter box or the Fantasy Roleplay starter box, all those sort of things, with a lot of replayability in there and a lot of sort of material to go at, whereas this one, I think if you've played it through once, that's it. I mean, yes, it sets you up with a castle, and there's some useful stuff in there, like maps and things, but the actual scenario is once and done for a particular group, isn't it, really? But again, I suppose on the other hand, it's relatively cheap and you get a whole load of dice in there, and the dice, as we know with your zero engine games, are pretty expensive. So I think it's almost worth the price of admission for that sort of thing. But yeah, okay, all right. So we played through that one, and then we sort of launched into the Lost Mountain Saga. So just a bit of context, really. So the Lost Mountain Saga was based on a podcast, but basically it's somebody who's telling a story, okay, and was using Vaesen as a bit of a loose narrative system for it. So it was very, very, I say, narratively focused. And then it was very successful, so they took that and they turned it into the Lost Mountain Saga. So I suppose you said it was quite slow, and there's quite a lot to it. What did it feel like from your perspective as players?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I did feel it was quite linear. I also felt that there was a bit of a struggle for you as a GM because I felt very much like we had to do certain things in an order, but it wasn't the link. You put in it. Did you find the links were tenuous? And they were. They really were to start with. I suspect it's because we were, as players, supposed to come up with a lot more ideas and then refine it as we went. It didn't kind of work that way.
To be honest, I don't think it would work that way with many play groups. If it's not clear what the player characters are going to do next, or at least if there's a set of options for the player characters to do next, they tend to sort of sit there and go, well, We'll just wait for the next thing to come along. I think it's quite difficult to be proactive in a situation where it's not clear what's happening.
Yeah.
It tends to be quite passive. So
Yeah, I felt it started off quite slow because of that. And as I said, I did feel that you struggled a little bit. And that's no offense to you.
No,
I just
not
feel
at
that
all.
anyone might have
Yeah.
done. I felt you did find it a little bit harder to pull it where you wanted it to necessarily go.
The thing is that, I mean, you guys are experienced role players, okay? So you're used to sort of, the conceptual framework about how to progress through a scenario or a campaign, okay? So you guys all know how to do that. I think you all know this, that I tend to start these things and then work it out as I go along. And so I happened to have Lost Mountain Saga on the shelf, so I pulled it off the shelf and then started running it. But it became very clear to me relatively early on that actually, well, number one, it did seem quite linear. I think because it was written or derived from what was essentially as like a story, like an actual play story. So that was there. I think what you sort of saw was me having difficulty with it, was I was breaking it down as we were playing it and putting it back together again. So what I was trying to do was create a couple of factions in there that might almost act as opposition to you guys and use that to try and draw you in. So we had the Vanadisia, so they were that sort of group who are going after the stones. It doesn't really detail what the stones do, so I sort of created that side of things as well. You've obviously got the Svea Mining Corporation, and again, they are the sense that I got from reading ahead from it was actually you guys were meant, or the players are often passive observers of what's happening as opposed to leading the...
Exactly what I was going to say. We're often waiting for an NPC to go and do something.
Yeah.
And tell us something before we could progress.
Yeah.
Which seems to,
Yeah.
And also found that through line of it's supposed to be the green stones only really came apparent right at the end.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much in the way of any plot device at the beginning to show us that these were really important.
Yeah.
Which I think
it basically needed the other guy to turn up, didn't it, with his green stone and then affect the child's spirit in the mine. That was the first time we knew that they would affect that they affected Vaesen.
The first hit you had of that.
So I do wonder if the links would be less tenuous. Maybe if we had more players, we'd have had more opportunities for links, so it would have felt less like maybe a bit less tenuous if there'd been kind of more opportunities to spread the links about rather than obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again,
I don't know.
It's a lesson, isn't it? I think we all spend a lot more time gaming than most people do. And so, when I pick up a campaign, I'm thinking I'm prepared to accept that it's going to be, there's work involved, but that it will stack up. And especially with the quality of the stuff that Free League put out, I was prepared to say, okay, we'll start this off. Yes, I need to do a bit of tweaking as we go along, but we can make it work. But doing a bit of research on what other people have thought about this particular campaign, the fact that it is very linear, that actually you're just sort of observers on a journey rather than driving a scenario, that's quite common, actually, that people have experienced that. It's lovely. There's lovely artwork in there. I just think that if you were a starting GM, even I'm not a starting GM, but I found it quite challenging to run it. You start with the starter box, which is great, and then you go, oh, that's lovely, I've heard about that, and then you will rapidly hit a brick wall.
I think that's the problem when it's a scenario that has been based on an actual play.
Yeah.
I think that is dangerous. And it's the same as whenever I hear a GM go, I've got a campaign, it's based on X book. So you want us to play characters in X book and do what X characters do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially you could say it was a story because there are certainly quite a few moments where, as you say, we are effectively watching the characters of the book do something with limited potential to actually influence the story ourselves. So.
Yeah.
But it had some lovely set pieces.
Yeah.
We
went through. I agree with you, Sam. I think there were some great set pieces in there. I think the storyline maybe needs tweaking to still have the good set pieces, but allow for the players to do free stuff. Maybe. My
favourite bit was where the child ghost turned up at the church. I thought that was a really great set piece. Actually, I really enjoyed that bit.
Yeah, it is good fun. I think, like I say, there are some good, as you say, scenes, and you'd expect that in something where it's a story. I think that if I was going to run it again, I would strip it right back. I mean, there's supposed to be 5 scenarios in there. There's one scenario you didn't even touch, and I sort of cut it out completely because it's a nice scenario in and of itself where one of the Vanadisi gets kidnapped or taken hostage by this lindworm and you have to go and rescue them. But it's nothing to do with the plot. It's a nice sort of standalone, but it doesn't advance it at all. If you were struggling to see the through line with what we had, adding that in would just say, why are we even doing this? This is irrelevant to us at all. I think
at one point I did ask, what are we actually doing here? Why are we coming here at all?
Why are we doing this?
So I think, as I say, there's some nice stuff in there. I think there's some themes, there's things you could work on, but it needs a lot more work to make it easy to run it straight from the book. I think I know they've brought out another campaign, which is City of My Nightmares, and I haven't read it, but I did a bit of digging around about whether it is a more coherent approach, and apparently it is. So it has things like more what they call investigative paths in there, which are a bit like, okay, here's a set of clues, you follow them, it provides this. If you don't follow it to the end, then you're at a disadvantage at various points. So I think that hopefully that's something that the Free League have probably learnt from. I'm sure Vaesen has been a huge success. They've brought a lot of stuff out for it, Kickstarter and otherwise. So I'm hopeful that City of My Nightmares is something that really does reward campaign play. Because I think without that, I think if you're only doing one shots, you're only getting half the story with the HQs and that sort of thing. Because obviously you don't get that in one shots.
Exactly how it felt. It felt like a series of one shots that we played that didn't really link together as they should. Have played this new.
It's on the list. I've got it, Sam, as you'd expect. I've got it. I kickstarted it like
15 years down the line.
15 years. Well, we'll get to it eventually. It's a series of 4 scenarios, and so I think we'll talk more in a second about it. But I think I'd like to return to Vaesen because I don't think I've really realised it fully in terms of what it does. Kat, you were talking about, obviously, you've run some one-shot things, and you talked about the value of the HQ. What would be your sort of preference for one-shot play or for campaign play? Do you think?
I think Vaesen would benefit from. It does benefit from campaign play, possibly with the players more making up what sort of things they want to see, and then sort of like doing your own campaign type thing. I think it's one of those. I think. But I think the HQ, you could do a lot more stuff around that. You could literally do a whole campaign about you pretty much investigating an abandoned HQ and all the shit that goes on in there. In fact, going out to the local church to get something that used to be in the HQ, like the temple. Brilliant. That's wonderful. But one of the ex-members nicked a bunch of stuff, took it to the local church. Now you've got to get that back to be able to build your temple. All things like that you could do and stuff like that. I think he's got such a great resource, and it's kind of just ends up being a bit like a shopping cart of if we buy this, we can get vials of holy water for free. Whereas I'd like to see it as a bit more of a kind of almost like a member of the party.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, I would probably do the HQ is its own entity in its own right, and it's just that it's long since pledged its service to the society.
Yeah. And
I've kind of the idea of that. No, you can't go and find that room until you do this because, you haven't tidied up my hallways, you bastards. I would just love to see that.
So I'm envisioning so basically what I'm thinking of, it's almost like a bunch of kids with the sight, okay, who are drawn to the HQ. They never actually go on mysteries as such because the game is very prescriptive about how mysteries work, but essentially they are building their own little sanctuary, and so they don't have to travel outside the town at all. They could do something really local, and I think that'd be quite cool. Actually, that'd be quite good fun.
I think you could definitely make the HQ better in that. Instead of saying you've got 5 experience points, what do you want to get for the HQ, you could say as part of the adventures you uncover a chapel and a library, but you've only got the experience points to clean up one. Which one do you want to kind of add? And then so you literally have at any point you've always got a choice of 2 or 3 rooms that you can develop using your experience points, rather than saying, "Well, I've got 5 experience points, I'm going to buy a lab or something."
And there's a mini adventure attached to each one. It doesn't have to be particularly long, but a little bit of something.
Exactly.
I quite like that. That idea.
Yeah,
it's quite good fun. We'll have to write it. Sam can write it up because he's good at writing campaigns.
I thought the whole HQ thing was a bit pointless, to be honest.
It did feel a bit tacked on.
Restricted it. stripped it out at the end. I didn't like it at all.
And you guys didn't really make much use of it anyway, I don't think, did you? I mean, you used it a little bit, but it was more, right, okay, let's do this. Because again, I think you were desperately looking for something to sink your teeth into. Because as gamers, you're looking for the hook. And I think the hook was pretty well hidden in this campaign. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
I think it was fun. And again, this was a first attempt at playing on Alchemy VTT. And the reason why I did it on this one was, well, one, because there was a humble bundle some time ago where basically you could get pretty much all the Vaesen titles on Alchemy. So I had it there anyway. And also because I do spend far too much time on Foundry. And I think with Alchemy VTT, which is relatively new, although it's in version 1 now, you can't do that. It's pretty tied down. I mean, you can waste time finding music collections, which Sam will then turn off instantly as soon as he gets into the game anyway. But really, but you can't add modules to it. So really, the time you can sink into the non-gaming stuff is relatively limited. And also, I think it's quite well suited to Theatre of the Mind because it is supposed to be having these like immersive scenes. Nothing that Foundry can't do, but I think it's just a slightly different approach to it. So this is the first time I think that you guys have played on Alchemy. Any thoughts? What did you think?
Yeah. I feel I had a bit of a learning curve. It does feature a lot of sort of small, slightly hidden buttons to do stuff. I found it a little bit counterintuitive, but I got used to it towards the end. But no, I liked it. It's quite a nice layout. I do like the sort of actions and certain equipment where you can just click on the equipment or the actions to actually do this. So if you click on like binoculars, it rolls you skill with the bonus for the binoculars and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite good.
You do have to set that up though. It's not an instant thing. You've got to tell it what the numbers are.
Yeah.
A little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Quite annoying in the fact that it was every game we play, there's your character sheet tab right in the middle of the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
With no option to move it out of the way. So when a map comes up, for example, it's right in the way. I just want to move it to one side, but you can't.
Okay, they've just released Blades in the Dark, okay, so which is like a sort of full integration. And if you look at Vaesen, I think Vaesen was one of their very early implementations, and it is, let's just say it's some of it is, it's not quite up to the current standard of Alchemy. Basically, you can go on there and run games for free if you want to, but you do end up with a whacking great dice button in the middle of the screen, which sometimes is very annoying. And I've actually put it on Discord saying, this is annoying, you need to sort this out. But yeah, the look is supposed to be that you're looking through your character sheet. You shouldn't have to open things up, really. In reality, certainly on Vaesen, you certainly have to do that sort of thing. But yeah.
I liked it. I felt it was very pared down. It helped with the Vaesen setup. It was very pretty. I do understand Sam's thing about the character in the middle bit. Yeah, it was a bit frustrating, but ultimately I can ignore it after a while. It doesn't bother me as much. But I did find it was very pared down. I also found, unlike Foundry, when the GM goes to do something and Foundry decides not to do it, it's very awkward. I.e., as you can see, this thing is emerging from it. Can't see it. This didn't happen there because you had the tactical mode, which when you go on to had the maps or the little, almost a battle map. It was you plonking things. So you're vaguely you're here. And as I say, it does suit Theatre of the Mind better. I can't see anything that's very battle mappy working as well on it. But I liked it. I just thought it was very simple. I felt for the GM, it seemed a lot easier to run. For me as a player, it was very easy to use. If there was a problem, I found the alchemy got back to you faster. Because I find if there's ever been a problem on Foundry or Roll20 and you ask for advice, it can be a bit of a bugbear to get that advice. It can be very slow.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, have you checked out our frequently asked questions? Well, yes, I have. That's why I'm asking you. But no point did Alchemy do that. They would just go, oh, no, brilliant. It's there.
Yeah. Okay. So did you actually go on the Discord and sort of ask a few questions about stuff?
They're quick and they're quite nice with it.
They're pretty responsive. It's a pretty responsive community. Vaesen was like the first toe in the water from my perspective. It's not perfect at all, but it's a different play experience and a different GM experience, certainly to Foundry. Just different. I mean, I'd never run something like Savage Worlds on this. It would make my head melt trying to do Savage Worlds. But Sam and I are playing Out of the Ashes on it, so I've just basically created the sheets for it.
So quite customizable. I think that's one of the big advantages for it. You can add things in. Look, we were asking for certain trackers so we could tell when we'd used a skill, for example, and you added those in, which was really useful.
Yeah.
Overall, I really like the implementation of it.
Yeah.
Just some of those annoying things to get out of the way.
They're pretty responsive. I think I spent a lot of time getting blades out the door because a lot of Kickstarters have got alchemy as like a sort of a follow-up. So, for example, I'm waiting for Coriolis the Great Dart to come out, and the Flowers of Algrab and all that sort of stuff has got lots of alchemy stuff coming out. But certainly when I go to run the next version or the next episode of next chapter, episode, whatever, series of Dark Future, I'm going to be running it on alchemy, but I'll be using Outgunned, because that's on there as well. So it's like a native system on there. So we'll see how that works. But yeah, I'm a sucker for new stuff. So that's anything shiny to play with is always good. And finally, we've also been using a different tool for our session write-ups. So I've been using something called Saga 20, just giving that a go. So the way it works is you sort of have to record the session, and then you upload it to a 20 server, and you can say, write this in a long story, or just bullet point it, or is it just the facts, or is it concise? Basically got a whole range of options, but it's pretty quick. So if we do a sort of 2.5 hour session, it turns out a session report in about 20 minutes, which is pretty quick. I don't know what you guys thought about the write-ups. What do you reckon? Any good?
I thought they were fun, actually. I thought they were pretty good. Yeah, they seemed to be.
I think it's incredible.
I enjoyed them.
Yeah, it's so useful just to look back at what you've done on those bullets.
Exactly, yeah.
Really, and it cuts out a lot of crap that we normally talk, doesn't it?
It's obviously well used to dealing with gamers because it doesn't have any of that stuff in there at all. It just managed to...
I think it's probably one of the best uses of AI I have seen for role-playing games. It's just a very fast summary, done very well. And I liked, obviously I've assumed you were using like the long story mode because it read quite well. It's not perfect, but again, it's something that if a player was to do, or God forbid the GM to summarize, it would take us like an evening to do.
Yeah.
But whereas you can get that out just to remind people what they've done, I thought it works well. It is actually legitimately a decent use for AI.
Yeah, it's quite good. So if you remember, Andrew, when we used to play RuneQuest and I used to do the write-ups?
Yeah.
What I've actually done is I've sort of revived the blog. And so what I do is, because as the player, or as the GM rather, I can set it, or you can set it so it auto-populates into a sort of a session write-up channel on Discord, so it'll link up that way. But also what I've started doing is copying and pasting it into my blog, so I've always got it. So all the old Quest stories are up there, and I'm doing it for obviously we did it for Vaesen, I'm doing it for the One Ring campaign, I'm doing it for Forbidden Lands, and doing it for Out of the Ashes as well, because I think it is pretty good. And I use sort of like the options I use are narrative and balanced. So it's not just the facts or incredibly long-winded. I think it's just enough. And what it started doing as well is to populate a wiki. So it'll sort of collect all the information about the characters. Yeah. The only thing that really annoys me about it is if you don't use all your sessions from a previous month, you lose them. And it annoys me because I've already paid for them. And so if I haven't used them, then anyway, I've expressed my concerns.
You've got your Patreon to pay for it.
Exactly. And for my alchemy subscription and all that sort of nonsense, and my Squire subscriptions, all the things I need to run my games. Cool. Okay.
It's about time you updated your Patreon, Steve. So.
Is it? I'm usually up there apologising for not getting these things out more promptly. That's what it is.
If you want us to pay for some stuff, you should give us some stuff.
I don't want anyone to pay. If people choose to, that's entirely up to them. You heard it here. But get them while they're hot, folks. Right. And I've called my blog All Anthrex's Narrative Annexes. Do you like that? Anyway, on that shocking note, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
It was good fun. I'll try to one that again.
Okay.
I really enjoyed Vaesen. I will certainly be more than willing to give it another crack.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'll probably have to run a campaign to really get my head a bit more around it. But I suspect it will be involving a castle that speaks to them now, because I want that in my life.
I quite like that, actually. That's quite a cool idea. In fact, it's a very cool idea. What about from you, Andrew?
I enjoyed the campaign. I think it definitely needs some tweaks. Maybe, as I said, a bit more involvement with the castle and some maybe a bit less linear. But yeah, no, it was great. Great fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, great stuff. And obviously, brilliant players as always make a campaign for a GM. So, anyway, on that note,
you even mentioned the fact that my character died epically.
Oh yes, I think I've actually got it recorded, so I might add it as a bit of an actual play thing. What do you reckon? Think I should do that?
It sounds a load of hard work, Steve, so I think you should do it.
Thanks. Well, I've got to do something to earn these vast Patreon dollars that come in.
That's right.
Wasn't reader, it is not vast. Anyway. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for playing, and I will see you guys soon. First of all, who are you? Any socials? And I'm interested in what experience you got at running or playing Vaesen, because you're on record as saying Vaesen was your favourite game.
I'm Blythe, Judge Blythe on the Grognard Files, Dirk's sidekick. Am I on any socials? No, I'm not really anymore. I'm just on Discord. That's all I'm on.
Very wise.
I know it, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I've played quite a bit of Vaesen. A couple of years ago, ran a little campaign. And I've also played it at conventions recently. Played it at Grogmeet, Mike's, HomeFan Mike's game. And I think I played it at the last Grogmeet as well, Mike's game. So I've played it and I've run it. And I do like it. Is it my favourite game? That was probably said when I was running it and I'd first bought it and I'd done the thing that we all do of going, this is brilliant. This is the best game ever. That said, I would say it is certainly one of my favourite games. Yeah.
It's certainly top 5, possibly.
Yeah, and it's certainly my favourite Free League game.
Okay, all right.
So it's my favourite Free League game, yeah. Definitely.
Because I know you played, or you're playing quite a bit of, is it Mutineer Zero and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I've run a bit of that recently.
Okay, so just for context, so have you played things like Forbidden Lands?
I've never played Forbidden Lands. I've played Alien, I've played Tales from the Loop and Things from the Flood.
Yeah.
Mutineer Zero.
Yeah.
What else have I, what Free League games have I played?
Quite a bit.
I've not played Forbidden Lands, no.
Yeah, you're in for a treat if you ever played that one then, because that's like being plunged into an ice bath after playing things on Tales.
I've heard that. Sometimes it's one of those games that I've considered buying, and then when people talk about it, I've thought, maybe not.
Yeah, I think with Free League games, it's like we've got a core mechanic cell 2D20 system. On the face of it, they're all the same, but then again, they're all different. And I think it's the same thing with this, isn't it?
I agree entirely, and I think that's why Vaesen is my favourite, because I think Vaesen is a simpler end of it. I get slightly frustrated with Free League games that overcomplicate the game. I think the system they've got works very well at a simple level. And then when you buy a Free League game and they've complicated it by putting lots of extra bits in, you
I would say that Forbidden Lands is probably not for you then.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about it, and I think, why have you added all those?
You might want to play a couple of sessions just to get a sense of what it's like at some point, just so you can experience the true horror. I love it. I run it, so I'm grinning all the way through it. Yeah, so I'm making them all roll for weather. That sort of stuff.
Weather roll. No.
Weather rolls is top stuff. Anyway, that's an entirely separate issue. Okay, all right. I suppose first of all, we'll talk about the sort of the book, the rules, that sort of things. Then we can talk a little bit more about thoughts about campaign play, etc. Over to you. What was it attracted you to Vaesen in the first instance?
That's a good question. I think I'd bought Tales from the Loop, and I really enjoyed running Tales from the Loop. And then I think when the Kickstarter came out for Vaesen, I thought, if it's as good as Tales from the Loop, which I also like a lot, then it'll be a great thing. So I think I backed the Kickstarter. I don't back Kickstarters anymore, not very often, but at the time,
that was a COVID thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd gone a bit Kickstarter crazy, and I backed the Kickstarter. I think you've got to say with Vaesen, part of the initial appeal is the way it looks. It is a beautiful rule book. It's definitely a contender for most beautiful rule book ever made. And it's the rule book that made me start taking PDFs on a tablet to conventions because I thought, I cannot let this book leave the house.
You don't want anyone to touch that.
Yeah, I can't risk a coffee going over this book. Not this one.
You need a shelf copy and a play copy. That's what you need.
You know what? I considered that. I did consider getting another one and thinking, oh, this is the one I'll hawk around the conventions, and this one will stay in a glass case at home.
Of course,
with an alarm on it.
That's an entirely appropriate response.
Like the Doomsday Book in the British Museum. Something like that.
Yeah, so I think we touched on it. I touched on it when we were doing the other recording, but we were saying that because it's like the Tales from the Loop ones and that sort of series, they're based on a sort of an artistic sort of artist book, first of all, weren't they? So they've got that internal consistency in terms of art style. I think that's the basis they went from. And then they wrapped the rule system around it. But obviously, yes, beautiful. And that's obviously what's the first thing that sort of attracts people. In play itself, how did you find the rule book in terms of things like organisation? I suppose, just to add on to that, I suppose it depends on whether you're interested or care about the detail of the rules or whether you're just going to skate over the surface. But I suppose, where did you come in at it from and how did you find the organisation?
I think the rulebook's reasonably well organised. I didn't really struggle with it. I think there are one or two bits in the rules that make you scratch your head a bit. Remember thinking, the one I rolled around in my head a lot was the recovery rules, the rules about recovering conditions. I found that, I don't know why, but I found that a bit puzzling at times about how do you do this? What do you have to do? Do you recover? Is it a day somewhere safe? You get all that kind of thing. And the other rule I always chuckle about is the opposed roles rule, which is weird because it says, obviously, you roll the NPC roll, and whoever gets the most wins. Yeah. That makes sense. But then it says if there's a draw, neither of you have achieved it.
Yeah.
And you think, but there are situations where that's advantageous to one. So if you were trying to push your way in somewhere and a big bruiser was stopping you, how does a draw work? Because he's not stopped you going in, but you've not got in. That doesn't make sense.
And that's where they come up with these things that succeed at a cost sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm with you. So when you're barreling along running a scenario and you roll and then you don't get enough. And then Sam would go, actually, I think you'll find.
Yeah.
And I'll go, Sam. But he's right, as you say. And I think it's a bit,
It's the thing with the opposed rolls that the problem is that because it's you're rolling 5d6 and the opponent's rolling 4d6 and all you want is a 6. Draws are quite likely, aren't they? It's not like rolling d100 in something like Warhammer where you can break it down to a 1 in 100 thing.
Yeah.
It's quite likely that they might roll a 6 and you might roll a 6 and it's a draw. So I always felt like the rules about draws in opposed rolls seem like this is more likely than you imagine. Therefore, maybe it should be a bit clearer. Yeah. But there's the odd bit in it where you do think, you could clarify that maybe more.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, when we were touching about the swinginess of it all, like rolling 22 dice and no one getting a 6, and then Cat rolling 2 dice and getting 2 6. But them's the rules. That's the way it works, isn't it, really?
It's the rules. And also, what I would say about it is it's quite I think it's an odd game in as much as at one level you could say it's quite story driven, but it's also quite gamey. I remember when I bought the rules, there was a little bit of me thought, I'm not sure about this, because it's quite gamey, not just with the rule system, but the way it's structured. So you get that thing, don't you, saying, okay, you have a castle, which I'm sure we'll come on to, and you get an invitation. So the way this game works is you get an invitation from somebody to investigate a mystery. Then you can prepare for the mystery and you go on a journey. And on the journey, you can do this and then you do that.
And you roll for your gear before you go.
Yeah.
And your cash, how much free cash you've got.
Yeah. And I remember at the time when I got it, I got the actual rule book. I thought, actually, I'm not sure. Maybe it's not that good because it felt a bit too gamey.
Prescriptive, maybe. Yeah.
But then in play, I found it works quite well. Sometimes those investigative scenarios, and if you're not careful, go all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not like saying, okay, here's a castle with someone in it and you're going to go and rescue them and fight monsters. That's all very controlled, isn't it? But investigative scenarios, when you play Call of Cthulhu or something, I've run and played in adventures where it's gone all over the place a little bit. And I thought, on paper, with Vaesen, I wasn't keen on that. But then when I ran a few games, I thought, actually, that's very good because it controls the type of adventure that can go off at a tangent.
It suits one-shots very well, doesn't it? If you've got about 3 hours or 3.5 hours to get through this, crack on. Here's what you do next.
And the campaign that I ran, the little campaign around a couple of years ago, that was really a set of one-shot, really. It was a set of, they were all one, they were like, that lasted 2 sessions, but there was 4 or 5
different set mysteries that you
set pieces, really.
And not a lot of connection between them, other than stuff that comes up in play, for example. Yeah. That's interesting. We'll come on to that to talk about one-shot play versus series play or campaign play, whatever. But just coming back to your point about the process you go through. So what I did was I said, because it's, as I recall, from my reading the rules, it's basically, here's a mystery. You need to prepare for the mystery, right? So you get your +2 bonus. But this other players will go, I'll just prepare, I don't know, the history of this mountain, whatever. And then they get there and it's nothing to do with the history of the mountain, it's something completely different. So what I said was just... You get a +2 at some point. We'll do a flashback and you can describe what it is, if that makes sense. So there's that bit. And there's also the equipment. So like your players or your characters get, I think it's like a choice of 6 pieces of equipment when they're in character creation. What I did was I said, okay, they're all available to you. You can just pick 3. So you're not like, you've picked a guard dog at the start and it's irrelevant all the way through or something.
I do think that's interesting what you say about preparing for things and then finding out that it's no use or it's irrelevant, because I suppose one of the things that lies at the heart of a lot of the Vaesen scenarios, or the pre-written ones at least, and maybe the game as a whole, is the idea that the adventure or the mystery is deliberately set up to not be what you think it is. It's almost like an integral part of each mystery that it seems to be one thing, but it's actually another. And therefore, when you're preparing for it, there's always a risk of being tricked into thinking, that mountain's got something, like you said, a mountain's got something to do with it, so I'll do that. But of course, the mountain's got nothing to do with it at all. There's a great one of my favourite scenarios, and I won't give any spoilers away, is one called A Winter's Tale, where you're invited to go to a Russian noble's kind of banquet. It's very interesting. And you set off in the snow and things go wrong and you end up in a tavern. And it's really cleverly set up to make the players think it must be this or it must be that. And it's none of those. It's something that you can't really guess at. And I think a lot of the Vaesen scenarios are like that. And so you're right. The preparing stage is quite tricky because it's luring you almost into... Maybe that's part of the game. It's tricky. If you're a knowing player, you would think, okay, this is part of the game to trick me into pairing, I don't know, some silver bullets.
And it's nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with it.
But having said that, okay, so from a player perspective, I think if it's, I'm thinking it's going to go this way, that's one thing. Okay, it's nice to have a twist and a surprise. When you get into because these are games, aren't they? Obviously. And so you get certain players, probably consider myself in this one. There you go. You mean like that +2 is now wasted? That's +2 is irrelevant, isn't it, really? But it's almost like what I was trying to avoid is that whole gotcha thing. So I think it's, yes, absolutely the twist, you want that. But from my perspective, I was thinking, I don't want Sam to come around my house and beat me up because I've...
Sam wouldn't do that.
No, of course, he doesn't know where I live. But do you know what I mean? But no one likes gotchas in games. That's just not fun, is it, really?
That's true. Although I don't know, as a player, I do quite like... I don't know, a gotcha. You don't want a gotcha. You don't want to be made a bit of a fool of. You don't like that. But as a player, I quite like those mysteries where it's not what you think it is. And there's a certain pleasure as a player in working that out. I think that's part of it where you can look at it and go, hang on, this doesn't stack up. It's not that at all. So there's a certain fun in that. And I'm a player who does a good mystery in a role-playing game. I quite enjoy that kind of thing where you're discussing with the players what's really going on and maybe the slow dawning on you all that what you think is happening isn't happening and it's something else.
Looking at the GM's face while you're laying out your plans. Are you getting any clues? GM's like, poker face.
Yeah. I quite like that kind of thing.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to touch on was around equipment. So, as you say, there's a process. So, before you head out, you're supposed to roll your wealth. Is it wealth or resources and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, you have a wealth score, don't you?
Did you? I rarely bothered with that. I got carried away probably. I went away from my normal, very procedural, go through it step by step, and I think I just went, oh, whatever.
I think I have made a player roll their wealth thing, the wealth stat, whatever you want to call it, the wealth number, once in all the times I've run it. It never really mattered all that much. Because it only really matters, I think, if you go to travel to a village and there's a tavern, you think, they don't really care about whether they can afford the tavern or not. It's not really that relevant, is it? The wealth thing only comes in if they say, I want to buy, a silver dagger. All right, okay, do you? Oh, that'd be expensive, so let's roll. That kind of thing. But generally, I know what you mean, generally, you don't really. It's not the kind of game where you're counting the gold pieces, is it? At all?
No. Well, but your point about recovery rules being a bit, not too sure, because there's quite a lot of gear. So like they call services and establishments, and you can say, I go for a train journey and I recover for conditions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And again, I think that the recovery, the fact that it's so fluffy and woolly and there's different ways of doing it, and I think that ties into my experience in the game that actually there's not a lot of physical threat to the player characters unless they're in like a sort of a big showdown with something at the end. As just going through it, so let's say you're doing your preparatory, you're doing a bit of exploration, you push your roll, you take a condition. If you're in a library, are you getting frustrated because you can't find a book and then you're going to have a sit down and a cup of tea and it's gone again? So it's almost like in the non-threat parts of the game, pushing the roll almost becomes irrelevant. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know what your experience was of that.
I know what you mean. I suppose, I suppose what it's trying to do, maybe, and whether it succeeds or not is debatable, but what I think it's trying to do is try and create some kind of jeopardy, maybe, about being in a library and looking for a book, which a lot of investigative games don't. Some games, again, I'm not picking on Call of Cthulhu because I like Call of Cthulhu, but if you do library use, no, you don't find it. Whereas in this game, I suppose what it's trying to do is say, this game's not all about fighting. Therefore, we need to create some sort of problem, or jeopardy is probably the wrong word because you're in a library looking for a book. It's not jeopardy, is it?
The shelf might fall on you, but
but it's some kind of negative consequence of doing something that's not necessarily combat or life-threatening. You're not climbing a mountain in a hurricane. You're not fighting a monster. You are looking for a clue, or you're negotiating with an awkward NPC.
Yeah.
But it's trying to make that have a sense of jeopardy and maybe, like you say, a choice about whether to take a condition or not.
Yeah, it might be an implication for later in the game. So you could say, for example, we're looking for a clue about the count who lives on the hill and, I can't find it. I push my roll, I get a condition, but then actually I have a sit down. Sam's character had got a hip flask, so he'd have a swig from his hip flask. That would get rid of the condition. So it almost feels the jeopardy there is you don't find out the thing about this count and it turns out there's a werewolf and you should have had silver bullets. But that's not a condition, is it? That's more like in the game. And when we were talking about it in this was the other recording, it feels like although it's an investigative game, the mechanisms around investigation aren't very simple at its heart. And so it's not Gumshoe. It doesn't have that. You use your investigative points or investigative skills. And so it almost feels like it's half-baked in terms of some of that stuff, really. I think from a player perspective, you can barrel through it and have a great game. But I think if you, as a GM, you're thinking, how does that work? Is this relevant?
I think that's a kind of eternal problem with investigative games, isn't it? Because I think even Gumshoe, I've been playing some Gumshoe recently, and I'm not convinced that solves this problem of investigation, because we were playing Delta Green with Dirk, and you're laughing about it as well because it's really funny, where you get the investigative point. So you've got 1 point in archaeology and you've got 1 point in this, or 2 points. And that just indicates you're an expert and you get the clue, don't you? So you get it. But there was a point where he said, okay, does anyone have chemistry? And we all went, no. And then he went, oh, there's a clue here, but none of you've got it. And you think, that's worse than Call of Cthulhu. Because Call of Cthulhu, you might have a 10% chance with chemistry and someone might roll it. But in Gumshoe, actually, if I've not got the... So I just think it's a problem with all investigative things, isn't it? Because it's that sense of you want clues to be difficult to find. So like that, you want to think, there's a clue in this building, or there's a clue here if we can find it. But at the same time, you do want them to find the clue. Maybe no game really solves that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a couple of things come out of that. One thing I did want to ask you just before we jump on to talking about, I think, how Free League are trying to solve it in Vaesen. Did you, when you were running games, did you make players push rolls even if it was potentially irrelevant? I mean, I did, just full disclosure. Because
I think it's up to them, isn't it? I think you just have to step back and think, if they think this is really important, then they're going to push the roll. But that's up to them, isn't it? But I know what you mean. There's a sense of, so you feel slightly malicious or malevolent as a GM, knowing that this is you're on a red herring here. This is pointless, like that. I'm going to search the library for a book. There's nothing in the library. In fact, I've just invented the library because you've decided to go there. And you want to now push the roll because you convinced yourself that. But then again, is that not part of a bit like the preparation thing, where is that not part of the game that as a player, you have to think, I think there's something here. Am I prepared to push the roll, even if there may not be something there, and take a condition? So I suppose that's for players to decide, isn't it? That's one of the tricky things about it.
And I'm just reflecting as well, because I suppose it is a bit of resource erosion, because they can use a memento once a day. So if you know that before the end of this day they're going to meet the werewolf, and they're going to miss the fact that they've wasted that memento earlier on, for example. I think there's a lot of, certainly from a GM perspective, it's a lot, as you say, creativity. That's always part of being a GM and as a player, but thinking, okay, what's coming? What's the cadence of this? And I think it's almost like you need to be really alive to all that stuff, whereas in practice, other investigative games like Call of Cthulhu, that may not be so much of an issue. So it's just, it's a deep game. Simple but deep.
It is. I think, that is the thing. And also, like the conditions, what we're saying about the conditions, that's a bit of a tricky thing, because you're right, you could take 2 conditions in a day and then do your memento, have a bit of a rest, have a cup of tea, and then you're fine. And you think, there's no jeopardy here. But on the other hand, it depends on the way the game's going and the momentum of it, doesn't it? So there are sometimes I found it was quite, swingy's not the right word, but quite extreme in terms of sometimes people would take conditions and recover, and you would think, so what? There's no real jeopardy there. And then there were other times where they would take conditions and then find themselves confronting the big bad at the end with conditions, and then it becomes far more.
That's a problem.
Because you're losing dice. You
haven't got time to actually
So it depends where they are in the adventure and what they're up to. Towards the end, you think, don't take conditions because you're going to need the dice, and you're going to possibly get other conditions as well.
Kat suggested that, like when we played Vampire the Masquerade, your favourite game, but they've got that mechanism in there where you don't actually roll, you just compare what's my dice pool, what's the difficulty, so then it becomes more of you don't need to roll. But again, I suppose the heart of the game is around those conditions. So it's just interesting, what looks like quite simple sort of thing. Actually, it's quite, it makes sense.
And I think as well, I've heard that discussion about getting clues and investigating and whether you should roll for a clue. I've heard that discussion about almost every investigative game I've ever played, from Call of Cthulhu right through to Gumshoe, right through to everything. There's always, it just seemed like an eternal problem. Could you just give the players the clue? Even in Call of Cthulhu, people take the view, if spot hidden item, you don't have to roll that. If the GM wants you to find the clue in the office that you've just broken into. So it's the same thing, isn't it, with all games? Should you roll? Should you not roll? And you could imagine some GMs thinking, no, you have to roll for everything. I don't care. And then other GMs thinking, I'm a bit more of a, Oh no, come on! I want them to find it.
This
It's
whole, I want you to
pointless if you
find the
don't.
Shoggoth, so it's going to
Yeah, exactly.
or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I do think it's a sort of perennial problem that with investigative games.
There's the City of My Nightmares. Have you got that? It's come out. So
I've not got that one. No.
Okay, yeah. So this is basically it's because there's 2 campaign books they've brought out. So one is the Lost Mountain Saga, which is the one I ran, which is not great.
I've not got that one either. I've got Wicked Secret. I've got the Mythic Britain as well. Seasons of Mystery. I've got that one as well.
Yeah. But this one is where basically it's the same story through 4 different mysteries. Right. What I understand, it's got investigative paths in there. Oh. So you progress down these sequences of clues. So like you say, you find out a little bit more which you can use. But it's the same mechanic. But yeah, I think that, again, they're aware that it's an issue. Just generally. And I suppose they're trying to find a way to solve it.
It's good that they're trying to solve it, but it does make you wonder, can it ever be solved in any role-playing game?
Yeah. Wow.
Gumshoe's supposed to solve it, but last week when I was playing it and no one had chemistry, they didn't solve it, did it? So
no, it just showed the shortcomings of the characters. That's what it was.
I don't know. I think it's a strange thing because, as I say, any conversation about an investigative game that I have with anybody about any system like that, everyone has the same sort of scratching their head moments of, what do I do with this? Do I make them roll? Do I not make them roll? What if they roll and they fail? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just.
But if they get an opposed roll and both get no successes, what happens then? Who knows?
What happens then? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we talked about a lot about the system. We touched just briefly. We talked about the system in terms of like conditions and combat. Have you ever had any of your characters, either you as a player or when you're running the game, actually die? Because I had 0. I think that the players were so terrified of being broken at any point that we actually defaulted to a rule for simplified crits, isn't there? So you don't even need to use those crit tables anymore, that whole thing. In fact, we never rolled on that table, so we could have just taken that page out of the book.
Nobody died, and you never really felt under much threat. Maybe at the end, once or twice, there was a bit of stuff. Yeah. But then again, what I enjoy about this is that it has monsters in it. Obviously, there's monsters, creatures and magical creatures. That's a big part of it, obviously. But is it a game about fighting to the death? I don't think it is. What I think is really interesting about it as a game, once you step away from some of the mechanics, the concept of it is really interesting because it's not about. Sometimes it is about fighting a monster. Some of the monsters in it are just bad things that need sorting out. But a lot of the time, they're not, are they? The monsters are just being, their world's being invaded or infringed upon by people doing things and not understanding things. And part of the game is to fix that. And in a lot of the scenarios, it was the humans that were the real villains who were the problem. So I know what you mean, that you don't feel like, you're not going to die. You're not going to go and fight the trolls and there's going to be death and mayhem everywhere because the trolls are actually okay. They're actually not that bad. They look like people. They've just got little clues that they're trolls and their village has been upset by somebody cutting the local trees down. And you think, right, it's not about fighting things to death. It's actually about solving this problem. And I think
diplomacy. At the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting about it as a game. It's not, there's a big monster in the woods, go and sort it out. It is that.
It can be, but it's not.
It can be, but also sorting it out might be negotiating, making it happy, solving its problem, that kind of thing. It's not really a game about, again, to draw a parallel with Call of Cthulhu, it's not about going insane and being eaten by something. It's not like that at all, really, is it? It could be if you wanted it to be, but generally it's not.
So my thought about that then is, it's supposed to be about a game of interpersonal relations mainly, or it could be combat, whether it be Vaesen, interperson, whatever. But there's an awful lot of pages spent on combat rules and not a lot spent on interpersonal interaction, social combat sort of stuff.
One of the ways it does it is, particularly with the Vaesen, is things like those rituals, isn't it? So it sets up certain rituals that appease the Vaesen kind of thing, which I suppose not interpersonal relations. They're not interpersonal. They are like things you have to do, things you've got to get it to do. You've got to get it in a field with a cross drawn on it or something
or
like that.
Whatever
it might be is the thing. And that the part of the game is engineering the situation where you can do that to sort the problem out. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We touched earlier on about HQs, about castles and stuff. Castle, Gillen whatever. What I found was that because we were playing through this Lost Mountain saga, and because we weren't using the standard critical setup, there's a couple of things that I noticed in the rules itself. It's so you have there are these discovered locations, and the way it seems to set it up is that as the player characters are exploring and tidying out, clearing little cobwebs out of different parts of the castle, the GM say, "Oh, you might find somewhere that looks a bit like a temple. Would you like to spend some points on this?" And they go, "I'm not sure what it is," but and there's that mechanic in terms of, again, potential for a gotcha. We've just spent 6 points and we've got a boot cupboard, and what we really wanted was an armory or something. And the other side of it is all that material is in the player section. So actually the players could read all that up front. But yeah, that was one of my little gripes, if you know, about the way it's set out.
Again, the castle bit surprised me because, again, when pre-league games, a lot of them do this, don't they?
They all do it.
They all do it. I think
by the look of it. Alien doesn't.
Alien does. I don't think Tales from the Loop necessarily does. I think
I
think it has, like, you have a hideout, don't you? But I don't think you build, because it's just like kids in an old shed, isn't it? But they all do it, don't they? It seems to be a thing. But again, I remember reading it and thinking, I'm not sure about that. Again, it feels a bit gamey. Then again, you don't get to experience it in a one-shot, which is, if it's convention one-shot, you don't get that element of the game, which is a shame. But when we played that little campaign, my players really liked that. It was great. I sometimes thought, just do a whole session sitting here, sitting back. Because at the beginning of a session, we would go, okay, so you've got these points, you've got your castle, you've got this, you've got that. And they would spend a good 40 minutes enjoying a discussion about what to get, what not to get. And I thought that's actually quite a good bit of the game, really, that brings players together to make these decisions about what they've got in the castle. It was surprisingly good fun.
Yeah.
For them, and surprisingly easy for me as a GM to just start with a cup of tea and let them talk.
Yeah.
Do anything.
Kat had frankly, I thought was a brilliant idea. Okay. So she was saying that wouldn't it be good if you got a bunch of kids, let's say, who all had the site and for whatever reason they get into the castle. All right. So I was thinking almost like the double deckers meets Ghostbusters. That's one for you kids out there.
Me doing the Ghostbusters, yeah.
But basically, she was saying that the kids, they investigate, this has been taken by the church or the university. We need to go and get it back or negotiate with it. So actually, it's all focused around the castle rather than the castle being quite peripheral. Actually, it was more like how do we get a buff from this as opposed to your base. And I think something like where actually the whole focus is on the castle, that actually is your character's home. For me, that would be a very different way of approaching it. It could be quite good fun. And we double down on what you described as well.
Yeah, I suppose as well, one of the problems with the castle is it does require you to return to it after every adventure, or at least regularly. So if you did a campaign where people were just travelling from one place to another, the castle would become difficult. Not impossible to really bring it in. And I suppose that, again, it goes back to that thing about it being quite gamey. It's quite structured if you remove certain elements of it, you end up not really playing it in. I know you can play these games any way you want, can't you? But
of course.
Somehow Vaesen feels a bit more like a game where you should play it the way it's written, because if you don't, you're missing a big bit of it. So if you ignored the castle, said you've got the site and you're going to go on a journey across Europe doing this and this. You're going here, you're going there, you're going to Paris, you're going to Berlin, you're going to Austria, Vienna, and you didn't go to the castle. You were away from the castle for the whole campaign. You'd be missing a big bit of the game. You'd be missing, but because of that, it's almost like you've got to play the game the way it's written, because if you don't, you'll miss a big bit of it.
Yes.
And you can miss that bit if you want, but it's a shame to miss it because it's actually quite good fun.
Yeah. Definitely.
It does feel it's quite a structured game that going back to that idea of, here's the invitation, here's the preparation, here's the journey. That's the castle is part of that as well. That you come back to your castle and you build things and you discover things, and then you go on another adventure. And if you remove those component parts, does it fall apart as a game? Maybe it does.
I think you're right. As long as the players invest, and it's fun for them, because you say there's an opportunity there for doing different stuff. Certainly not to the ridiculous level the Forbidden Lands stronghold building, which is the most unbelievably complicated thing to do.
You're really selling that game to me.
The game is great, but strongholds.
I had it in my hands in game shops and really bought it, but no.
You probably need to play a few sessions to get your head around it first of all. Yeah. So is it one for you? But yeah, okay, all right. Is there anything else that sort of jumps to mind from the game perspective that we haven't touched on? Or I
think one thing that I really like about it is the way that magic works in the game, or particularly the idea that magic just works. It's not really. This sounds a bit weird coming from a gamer's perspective, because you would imagine you'd want rules. It doesn't. It does have rules for curses, doesn't it? So if the
craft and that sort of stuff.
If they do something to you as a player, then there are rules about how you resist it. Quite simple rules that you make a resistance roll. That's fine. But then it has rules for enchantments, doesn't it? Where the Vaesen can make things happen.
Just do it.
And they can just do it. So they can make it rain frogs. It just happens. You don't have to worry about the mechanics of it. And I quite like that idea, because sometimes in games they give, and I'm not saying the Vaesen are necessarily the villains here, but let's call them villains. Opposition, nasty magic, which sometimes mean it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It is rubbish, because you think, this sorcerer's got this spell, but it's a spell the players can have, therefore there are some rules about casting it, and oh dear, he's failed, that's rubbish. Whereas in this, because you're not really going to, you might have the odd magic item, you might have the odd enchanted.
Maybe some magic water, that's it, holy water, whatever.
But generally speaking, as players, you don't have magic, and the Vaesen do have magic. So they quite cleverly don't really have rules for their magic. They can just do it. If it's raining there's a village where it's raining every day and it won't stop raining. That's the Vaesen's magic, but it just works. And that's that, you know. I quite like, it's quite refreshing actually in a game.
And it's atmospheric as well, isn't it? Because the things they're doing aren't going to, as you say, if it directly impacts on a player character, then, player character gets a chance to do something about it, roll some dice.
Yeah.
But add into just give it's permission for the GM to go, that'll be interesting. That'll be eerie if this happens.
Yeah, because there's one where I think it gives some examples, doesn't it? And it says that one thing is everyone in a village has become mute. No one can speak anymore. And you think, that's great. That's quite weird and a bit scary for people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have rules where it says they can make the villagers mute, but you roll 3d8, and that's how many villagers are mute, and they can all make a resistance roll. It doesn't work like that. It just says, no, this is what's happened, and this is what's that's it.
Yeah.
It works. And like you say, it's not, if someone tried to make the players go mute, they would have a role to resist it. But
agency
it has
players,
that attitude that magic is like set dressing to some extent, and I quite like that. I think that works very well in it, really.
That's a good
refreshing element of it.
I hadn't really considered that, to be honest. But okay, all right. I think we're done then. Enjoy your games later. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via orlanth.bsky.social or via Discord at orlanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.